I just have a couple slides before we get into the demo. Thanks, James. Insecurities. Let's talk about these for just a second. Right now, we live at a time where security is probably one of the most emphasized things, yet one of the least practiced things that we do in IT and other industries do as well. It's almost impossible to keep a list of the number of websites that have had some sort of security issue over the last 6 months, year, couple years, because that list is constantly growing, almost on a daily basis. Unfortunately, we as a society tend to wait until an event occurs to apply retroactively some form of security or remediate some form of deficiency. Think about it. You don't go and buy a house alarm until your home gets broken into. Unfortunately, on the internet, you don't go and do a full security evaluation until usually after the break-in occurs. Happens all the time. And there's really some valid reasons perhaps for this, mostly customer demand. We're all developers, or most of us who are developers are tasked with quickly developing applications for our customers or for our clients. We oftentimes take those shortcuts. And you could kind of hear inside your head something saying, don't do it, this is wrong, this is going to come back and bite you later. But we don't want to take the shortcut, but we have to. We know it's going to shave off 20 minutes, half hour, perhaps a few hours of development time, and we've got a deadline to meet, and we've got other projects stacked up waiting to be done after that deadline, so we do it anyway, right? We're constantly cutting these corners. We also make a lot of excuses, right, as to why we didn't take the time to do security. Not enough time is probably at the top of the list. Just don't have the time to do it. No one cares about the application or the data. I hear this one quite frequently. Oh, it's just our internal project management stuff. While that may be true, that data may represent a piece in a bigger puzzle that does present a security risk. My favorite one is probably the internal only one. Those are the applications that I consider most at risk because all the users in the system already have passwords and accounts. Most thefts and most breaches come from within an organization, not from outside the organization. So protecting against quote-unquote trusted users has to be almost at the top of your list. Another good one is, well, our users are pretty basic. They're not too smart. Perfect example is I had a customer who was talking about building an application for truck drivers. And they said, oh, don't worry about them. They're all, non-tech savvy. They drive trucks. They don't really know the first thing about anything. Fine. I don't agree with that, but fine. Think about a truck driver who's an independent guy or may work for a small company who maybe in his 50s, maybe has a teenage son who kind of helps him with the marketing and the website and does his books and all that kind of stuff. That teenage son or daughter perhaps may be smart enough to break into the system and do some bad things. So we can never really trust who's behind the keyboard, especially for these internet deployed systems. And then there's the false sense of security that people get because I used a wizard in Apex, or just it's running on Oracle and I've read everything about how Oracle's 100% secure and nobody can break in, so they think it's secure. They may not know what they don't know yet. So given these stresses, to get our applications out quickly, given the very small amount of time we have to do so, this is a pretty solid recipe for disaster. Our applications, Apex, JSP, ASP, etc., likely have potential security vulnerabilities that we could probably quickly and easily fix had we known where they were and how to fix them. And that's exactly why we built sumnevaSERT, is it cuts down the time dramatically and identifies where your vulnerabilities are and tells you how to fix them. So sumnevaSERT stands for Security Evaluation Recommendation Tool. It's an Apex application that sits alongside all of your other Apex applications. So there's nothing to download, nothing to install. You basically flip over to a different tab, runs an Apex 4.0, and it's completely integrated to your workspace. And you'll see that in the demonstration, what I mean by that. It's also pretty easily customized. So if you don't like our rules or if you don't like what we give you as far as the evaluation criteria, you could change it to meet your business needs. What it does and how it works is it takes a look at all metadata that you've created while you're creating your application pages, items, regions, processes, validations, computations, dynamic actions, etc. runs in typically 10, 5, 7, 8 seconds. It's pretty quick. All of our testing has been done through VMware running on a laptop, so I'd imagine if you put it on a real server, it'd be even quicker. Each application that does get evaluated gets a percentage score based on the number of criteria it evaluated and the number of criteria that it found acceptable. So if there was 100 things, it found 50 good, 50 bad, you'd obviously get a 50%. And as a developer, you see this top-level score. That summarizes what your application did as a whole. You could drill down and use the tool to see all the discrete data that make up that master score. So you can go right down to the individual items or regions or columns that either passed or failed and see why they failed. Now, one of the benefits of the way that we built the tool, and largely it's because of the way that Oracle built Apex, is that I consider it what's called an upstream tool. We evaluate all of your metadata, period. Most other tools that do this type of thing are downstream tools. They require you to run your application and click through it, going page to page to page. They'll capture the HTML. They'll try to fiddle with the input values and pass in JavaScript or SQL injection through those and back to the server. And then it'll come back and say whether it passed or failed. Now, that's good, and I don't think you should overlook that. And in fact, that probably could be part of your overall security evaluation as well. The problem is, with any application, Apex included, is that you don't know what you're not seeing. Think about a standard Apex page. We may have a couple different items here that are conditional based on a business rule, based on an authorization scheme, based on the value of another item that's been set on a previous page. So if we're using these downstream tools and I'm not going through every possible iteration that I could think of, we're going to miss potential security threats because we're never going to render them in the HTML. So in the upstream model, which is what sumnevaSERT does, we evaluate everything. We don't care what the condition says. Even if the condition is set to never, we'll still evaluate that component and either pass or fail it. You may then override it and say, well, it's never going to render. I don't care if it's secure or not, but we don't ignore anything. Now, because of Apex's declarative nature, like I said before, we give you a preset configured rules, a set of configured rules. And these rules look for the most common security vulnerabilities that are found in Apex applications. The settings of the application itself, the application security and schema settings. We look for a lot of different attributes of pages, authentication and authorization scheme being two of those. And then we look for the more traditional security risks, SQL injection, cross-site scripting, URL tampering, and then we provide you with an overview of what your authorization schemes are going to give your users. Now, as I said before, one size doesn't always fit everybody, so you can add additional attributes to our attribute sets. You could remove attributes from our attribute sets. You could even change the results if it's a pass, or in a different attribute set if it's a fail, depending on which environment you're in. We allow you to use null or not null. We can compare values to a list of valid values, less than, greater than, or we could even use a PL/SQL function to evaluate your metadata and determine whether or not that it meets some criteria. So what a lot of our customers do is they've got different attribute sets for different purposes. They typically use our attribute set, maybe augmented slightly to meet their needs. They may have an attribute set that looks for very specific things and maybe gets a little bit more extreme when it comes to evaluating criteria for a more sensitive application. And I've talked to people who've built a minimal configuration set. Just look for these 5 things. We want to make sure before anything goes over to production, these 5 things are in line. Everything's got to get 100%, no exceptions. So it's very flexible. It'll grow with your business. You could create an attribute set and share it amongst multiple workspaces on an instance of Apex so that your developers can't make changes to it. And there's roles within CERT that allow developers to simply run an evaluation or actually manage and create these attributes. So let's jump into a brief demo of the tool. And what I'm running here is an instance of Apex 4.0 running in a VM on my laptop. And if I go to Application Builder, there's sumnevaSERT. It's a standard Apex app. It's sitting right there with the other Apex apps in my workspace. I'll go ahead and run it and log in. Once I log in, I see the other applications in my workspace, and if I want to evaluate one, I simply click on the icon. As you can see, the little progress bar here just takes a couple seconds to go through. Now, full disclosure here, this is the Oracle sample application. I did go through and break a couple things intentionally to show how the tool picks those up in the demo, but I also didn't break some things. So some things are inherent to the sample application in 4.0, others I've introduced. Suffice it to say, it got a 68% with 576 out of 846 items passing. The overview here shows you a little bit of information about the app, the name, the ID, etc. The deficiencies is a nice chart, and if you hover over it, we can actually drill into any of these specific categories that have issues. So page authorization has 19, item encryption has 65, hidden items has 14, etc. Along the top here, we have all the different menus that give you access into the different components that we've evaluated. So let's start with application settings. It's a very easy to read, easy to understand visual model here. The greens passed, the reds failed. Very simple. Some attributes we're simply displaying, right? You're kind of getting points for free here. Sort of like in the States, your SATs, you get 200 points for signing your name. We'll give you a few freebies as well. Others, however, debugging, for instance. Right now, the actual value in this sample application is allowed. CERT doesn't believe that's correct. It recommends that it's not allowed. Well, what is debugging? If I click on info, it's going to describe the attribute, kind of distilled from maybe what the help documents say. If you want to see what the help documents say, we can always click there, and it'll dump us right into the Oracle Apex help file. So there's info for lots of different attributes, and quite often I hear people say, oh, wow, I've always wondered what that did, and not until I ran this tool did I actually bother to look at it. Anything that fails, we get a fix link. And the fix link very simply describes what we need to do to remedy the situation. So if you're new to Apex or if you're not sure where this attribute is, it'll tell you step by step. Go to Shared Components, click on Edit Definition, set this to No, save your changes. Well, we've made it even easier. If I click on the pencil icon, what CERT is going to do is drop us in App 101, so the application that we evaluated, right on the page where we could make the change. So there's no need to write things down or try to navigate through the application, which of course is going to cost you time. You simply click on the edit link, save the changes, and now if I recalculate the page score, we're getting 577 points, and our debugging is now passing. That's essentially how the tool works across all the different attributes. Very simple, very integrated to Apex. We tried to make it as fast as we possibly can to go through and evaluate your applications. So let's take a look at some of the other things. Security settings, we look for session timeout attributes. We look for security attributes in the tool. And again, everything works the same from page to page, so I could very easily jump into the security attributes section and make my changes there for the application in question, App 101. We also take a look at some of your schema settings. In this case, we're getting a lot of failures because our rule set says your schema shouldn't have any system privileges. You may disagree with that. You may need system privileges for some reason. But as a rule, that's kind of what we decided to put in there. You could always remove that rule if you don't agree with it. So we're failing here. The only way to fix these, obviously, would be to go in and revoke the associated system privilege as a DBA. For each of the other sections here, we give you another summary screen, right? So you don't have to worry about that graph that has all the details and all the things that have failed, but you can focus on, in this case, just your page attributes. However, at any time, click on View Scorecard, and we'll present you with that graph from the first page, as well as a list of all the different categories with the most failures at the top and the least failures at the bottom, as well as recently edited components. So if you just changed something, you forgot what it was, you can always jump back into it by clicking on the pencil here. So under page settings, we look for duplicate submissions. We didn't do too well there. Page authorization, form autocomplete, and then page authentication. Take a look at just one here, form autocomplete. Here's all the different pages, and the ones that have it disabled, which is what we recommend, pass. The rest fail. Well, let's disable it for page 4. So if we edit the page and we scroll down to the form autocomplete attribute, simply disable it and save our changes. I'll go ahead and recalculate the page score here, and we'll get back another point. Now you may be thinking, wow, this is going to take some time, and that's correct. Security is hard, right? There's no easy way to go in and at least supported way from Apex to go in and batch update these. What SERT will do, though, is as you start using it and as your developers start using it, they'll know that they've got to evaluate to a specific criteria. So as they're creating pages, they're going to go set the attributes the proper way. First time they use it, they'll get a pretty low score, but the next time and the next time and the time after that, they'll automatically start becoming more secure developers because they know they've got to get over this hurdle and get at least some sort of percentage before their application can be introduced into the production environment. SQL injection, we look pretty much everywhere for those. Apex does pretty well here. Here's where I had to fudge things. Reports, right? So one of the reports failed. You can see from the chart here that we have 3 issues. And if we drill into the reports, it's pretty obvious where the issue is. So we're looking for item syntax, the ampersand period syntax, DBMS SQL, execute immediate. And when it fails, if you click on view, SERT will simply pull that SQL source from your report and highlight what it failed on. In this case, we're using the wrong syntax. This would easily be fixed by plugging in a bind variable there rather than the ampersand period syntax. Again, you never have to go across individually to look for stuff. You could always come back to the summary and it'll tell you what's left. But notice we're looking everywhere. Processes, computations, PL/SQL regions, charts, maps, calendars, trees, dynamic actions, authorization schemes, branches, LOVs, even validations that have any issues are going to get evaluated here. In the same concept, it's going to pull that SQL, whether it's PL/SQL function, SQL expression, PL/SQL expression, etc., and highlight what it found wrong. Same with cross-site scripting. Apex apps don't typically do as well here, especially older ones that have been upgraded from 3.0, 3.1, 3.2. Some of the report columns aren't necessarily done in the most secure way. Hidden items may have some issues as well. So for instance, hidden items that are not protected can easily be manipulated in the HTML and then submitted back to the server. So again, we recommend that all your hidden items are set to protected, and it's very easy to figure out which ones are which. These are all interactive reports. So you've used Apex, you develop an Apex, the tool's written in Apex, so you already know how to use all the different features of it. And you could slice and dice this, write your own, export it, put another chart on top of it, etc. Everything is already pre-built for you, ready to go. So if we turn off our filter, we can see a chart for this section. Lastly, URL tampering, and again, this is one of the areas where the item protection and the page protection are typically set to unrestricted. If we take a look at all of our different items, we'll see a little bar chart here that shows us how close to secure we are. In this case, most of them come back with nothing. Only one has a couple things secured. And if we drill into that, we'll again see the item protection level. Most things are unrestricted. We recommend at least some sort of checksum be applied so that users can't pass random values through the URL and set items that may otherwise change the business rules or the functionality of your apps. Item encryption is another one, and this brings up a good point that's going to introduce a feature in our next release. You probably don't have to encrypt every single item. Now, you may be encrypting at the database layer when you write to the tables, but keep in mind Apex session state is written to a table called www flow data, and it's done so in an unencrypted fashion. So if you're storing a credit card number, even in session state, that's being stored temporarily in a table in the database unencrypted, unless you've applied the encryption attribute. So what could happen, worst case, an Apex administrator can read that, a DBA can read that. If you're not properly securing your redo logs and archive logs, it may be able to be mined from those files as well. So one of the features we're going to introduce is an exceptions. You'll be able to come over here and say, you know what, I don't think I need to encrypt the city. That just doesn't make sense. We don't care. It's a city. It's not secret. You'll be able to click somewhere over here and provide an exception. The exception, you'll document it as to why you think it's okay, will have to also be approved by your manager. So we're going to have a very simple workflow. This way, no developer can basically put 100 exceptions in and make their application 100%. Once it's approved, you'll get an adjusted score, so maybe 579 out of 846. It'll also list any exceptions that were included as part of that adjusted score. Because again, no tool ever that anyone would ever make is going to be 100% correct 100% of the time. We understand that there is this need for exceptions, and we're going to build that into the next release. Lastly, to conclude the demo, the authorization schemes. A lot of people use authorization schemes throughout their applications, and quite often we've got different developers from different consulting companies, different groups, all kind of building applications in the same place, and people's definition of what the admin role is very different from app to app. So what SERT lets you do, without doing any scoring here, is just show you all the different components that are mapped to the admin user's authorization scheme. So if I give a user that scheme, he'll have access to pages 8 and 9. He'll have access to a sales quota region on page 1. And if we scroll down, he'll also have access to this admin, this T_admin administration tab. So at least it gives us an idea as to what an admin means, because the term is just so abused and so vague that we just can't be sure from app to app what privileges a user is going to inherit. So to summarize here, SERT provides you with the ability to easily and quickly identify and remedy most Apex security vulnerabilities. It's not designed to be used when you're done, but it's designed to be used throughout the development process. As a byproduct, and I think this is one of the bigger values of the tool, is your developers will become more security conscious. And perhaps that will bleed into other areas, maybe the PL SQL side, maybe the Java, .NET side, and they'll really start thinking about security from day one, not as an afterthought that they hope that some tool is going to be able to say, do this and you'll be secure. Licensing, we've got two different options. Per Apex instance, which allows you to use any number of workspaces, any number of applications, any number of users. You can have 100 workspaces or 10 workspaces. It's still the same license. Another option for larger organizations who may have 3 or 4 servers that support a single production instance is our production stream license. 0.4 servers, you could run SERT same fashion as our instance license on up to 4 different servers, as long as they flow to a single production server. The requirements are pretty simple. If you're running Apex, you can run SERT, right? We don't do anything that Apex doesn't require. So we'll run on 10GR2, 10203 or greater, SE1, SE or Enterprise Edition, Oracle Apex 4.0. Now we're already working on our next release here. We're going to have tons of reports, right? Because right now it's an interactive tool, which is good, but people want to take a copy of the report of what SERT finds included in some sort of system documentation or auditing documentation. We're going to be able to spit out a number of different PDF reports right from the tool itself. Scheduled evaluations. You're going to be able to say, run SERT on this group of applications or these workspaces every night and keep the score. So I could now do some trending. Are my workspaces getting more secure or are they getting less secure? What's my most secure workspace? What's my least secure workspace? The ability to add the exceptions, we talked about that. Saving evaluation results. Right now, once you log out, things kind of go away, but we're going to make those a little bit more permanent so you can pull those up later on. Single workspace installation with Apex 4.1, there's a new feature that's going to enable us to say, install SERT once in a single workspace, and if you want to, you'll be able to see across all workspaces. We're looking at some sort of hosted solution for maybe one-off type activity, and then the ability to move these attribute sets from instance to instance. That's going to be very important very soon, so we're going to build that in. All the hooks are there in Release 1.7. That'll be completed in 2.0. So for pricing details, more information, if you want me to do this demo for your organization or chat with your security folks, feel free to give us a call or drop us an email at sales@sumneva.com. We do have trial licenses available. If you're interested in that, just drop a line to this email and we'll get back in touch with you. And James, I'm going to turn it back over to you at this point.
Great, thank you, Scott. If you could just bear with us, everybody, there's a little bit of a delay on passing the screen over. Okay, sorry about the slight delay. I'm going to pass over to my colleague Tom Harris, who's going to present this section on Schema Compare for Oracle.
Okay, hello everybody. Thanks for joining us today for the second half. I'm going to give a kind of a 101 on deploying an Apex application and try and show how the Redgate tool, Schema Compare for Oracle, can solve one of the classic problems that you may run into when you're trying to move an Apex application from one environment to another. So I'll just so here's some of the classic scenarios that you may be familiar with. You've got development environments, test environments, and production environments, and things change between those environments. And typically, you're interested in moving database changes between different environments, normally up the chain, from dev to test or from test into production. There are also a number of different approaches for trying to solve this problem. Fairly common is to write the scripts yourselves. So when you're faced with doing a deployment from a development environment to a test environment, you have to identify what changes you've made and write some PL SQL scripts to do the upgrade, then run those scripts against the test environment, then verify that everything is as you would have expected it to be before you then go ahead and actually test your application against the test environment. You can recreate the test environment from scratch. That's okay, but you may already have a whole bunch of other stuff in your test environment, test databases, test data, stuff that you don't really want to lose and then rebuild. So it's nicer if you could maintain your test environment rather than having to sort of drop it and recreate. It's not a new problem. This isn't something that's suddenly come up. So obviously the industry is already offering a number of sort of products that can help you with this. The free Oracle SQL Developer IDE does have the ability to compare schemas, limited in functionality. And as we'll see, there is a basic schema comparison tool within Apex. And obviously I'm going to show you, Redgate's approach to this, which is to have a dedicated tool which just does schema comparison and hopefully does it extremely well and in a very easy way. So there will be a demonstration of Schema Compare for Oracle, but I wanted to take it back to Apex and kind of take it back almost to the beginning. So I'm running a virtual machine here with Apex. And I'll just explain the scenario. I've got an Apex workspace, which is my sort of development workspace, and I'm going to quickly build a very, very simple Apex application within that development workspace. And then I want to take that application and run it in my test workspace and just basically ensure that everything is working correctly in test and then, take it to the next stage. So this will be very familiar to everybody. I'm going to go database applications. And I'm going to go ahead and create one. through application builder, data acceptance application, create, create a database application from scratch. Looks good. And we've actually got a database schema that we want to target. This is the development version of the widget database, and the widget database stores widgets. So, and I'm interested in building an Apex app which allows me to retrieve some information about the widgets that I've currently got. No great surprises so far. So I'm going to create a very simple report. I'm going to look at the table, and the table, again, no great surprises, is going to be called widgets. So I'm going to add that page. Create. Standard stuff, no tabs, no show components, no authentication, so just very, very simple stuff. I'm going to go with the red theme, that's fine. I'm going to go ahead and create that application. So let's just run it and verify that everything is as we would expect. Okay, so although the schema is there, I guess there's potentially no data within the schema. I might just need to. But let's try and imagine that this was just a development environment, and we were kind of happy with that result. It's just a case of building the application, and that all of the data is actually in the test environment. So I'm happy that my application basically seems to function correctly. The button seems to work. This is all obviously quite a very, very simple example. But once I'm happy that my development work is completed, I now want to take this application and move it over to my test environment. So I'm going to use the standard Apex tools, and I'm going to export that application out. Sensible is only one application, so export it. So we can generate a SQL file containing all the information about that very, very simple application that I've just created. Happy with that. So I'm going to log out of my development workspace, and I'm going to log into my test workspace. And I want to import that development application I've just created into my test environment to test it. That's obviously a key step that most companies go through. So let's find that exported SQL file. Import it correctly. And the only difference is that I now want to target the test version of my database. The test version of my database contains all of my unit tests and all of my test data, so I can check things like scalability and edge cases, performance, scalability. So I go ahead and target my test schema, and I install it. And so we can see here that the tool that's provided by Apex is very slick. It's a simple case of exporting out to a SQL file and then re-importing it, and it's worked. So I'm going to go ahead and run it. But running it is not such a great success. We get an error that I guess we could potentially try and understand. Something has obviously gone quite badly wrong. There's a skew, which it doesn't for the new guy. And I know that the development schema actually contains some new work that isn't in the test environment. And so my challenge now is to identify what is different between the development version of the database and the test version of the database, generate that script to move the changes from development into test, and then come back to this application and make sure that it does run correctly. So now we're back to the slides that I walked through at the beginning. We've got to think about how are we going to work out what has changed between development and test. Now, I'm not an Apex expert, but I think there is some tooling within Apex where I can fire out some utilities and hopefully show what is different between the schemas. Here we are. So this is a utility that's provided as part of Apex. I'm running Apex 4.1, and I don't know when this utility come in, but it allows me to compare two schemas. But here's the first stumbling block. I haven't configured this workspace to have access to the development schema, because this is just my test workspace. It's only expecting to access the widget test schema. So I can't actually go ahead and see what has changed between my test environment and my development environment. So that's slight irritation, but it's not a big problem because I'll just log out and I'll log back into the dev workspace and hope that that one's been set up to give me access to both schemas. So here's my development version of schema, and yes, obviously the development schema has typically got more access to things. And so we're going to compare all of the objects between widget dev and widget test and see what Apex can help us with to try and get this test application running. So this is what it gives us. It obviously identifies that there's bunches of things that have changed, and that perhaps this is more than I was expecting. I didn't really realize that the developers had gone ahead and made such dramatic changes to the database running behind my Apex application. And so, I mean, it seems to me like all this can tell me is that stuff has changed, and there's quite a lot of it. And I can sort of click, but nothing seems to happen. So, I mean, it gives me an idea. It tells me the high-level information that dev and test are not the same. But after that, it's not really helping me solve my specific problem, which is I want to get the test environment working. And I can't drop the test environment and just recreate the database, because there's stuff in that test environment that I want to keep, the test data that I'm not prepared to lose. So what I'm looking for is some way of identifying the differences between dev and test. And so that's where our tooling comes in. So hopefully now I can spin up. So this is now Redgate's product, which is called Schema Compare for Oracle. And it basically just does one thing. It allows me to compare two different Oracle database schemas, shows me what is different, and then generates a script so that I can move the differences between one environment and another. And here I've got it set up to compare exactly what we're interested in, the development schema widget dev against the test schema widget test. And it's already got the credentials correctly to connect to that database, and even more importantly, I've actually done the comparison. So we don't have to wait whilst it goes up and actually compare the two schemas. We just jump in straight to the results. And now I'm being able to see an overview of how the development database is different from the test database. And specifically, I'm interested in the widgets table because that's the one that my Apex application was trying to hit in the first instance. And so I can see at the bottom half of the screen the definition for the development version of the widgets table, and on the right, the test version. And very, very quickly highlighted in yellow is the fact that the developers have added an extra column to the widgets table in development. And so when I try and run my Apex application in test, it is expecting to see that column. And when it doesn't, it fails, and it gives us that rather cryptic error message, but does talk about the fact that there's no skew. And so I now understand what has happened. And that's fantastic, because I'm now thinking, well, great, all I've got to do is write a bit of scripting, move that column from dev to test, and we're done. But I'm thinking, well, what are these other objects that are also being highlighted that I should look at? What's going on? Well, the developers have added a bunch of new indexes, and they've added a new stored procedure, and they've changed some of the other tables, not just the widget tables, but some of the other tables, and these tables are probably going to be interconnected. So I'm a little bit concerned about just writing a little piece of script and updating the widgets table in test and making my Apex application work for now, only to find that when I start using other objects, everything breaks again. So in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of the schema differences from the development environment and move them into test. and the tool allows me to do that simply by selecting all of the objects. And now I can go ahead and produce that piece of deployment SQL to move those changes across. And to do that, I simply found the deployment wizard. And I won't really compare, and I won't save that, but I will actually show you how it creates the script. So here it's showing me all of the objects that I've chosen to deploy from development into test. And here is the piece of SQL that it has created for us. So I'm not having to do any work here. The tool has taken care of creating the SQL, and importantly, creating the SQL in the correct order. So we've calculated the dependencies and scripted up the changes according to that dependency diagram. And completely by accident, the first change that it has chosen to script out is adding that SKU column to the widgets table. And so I've quickly looked at this, and I'm broadly happy. I have a quick check if there are any warnings. It's warning me that I'm truncating one of my columns, but it's not in the table that I was originally targeting or made the application. So I'm going to go ahead and deploy that, which basically means it's going to execute that piece of SQL against the test environment. Gracious, I think that may well be because that test environment. Gracious. So the password has expired on the test environment since I've set up this demo, which is unfortunate. I'm not sure if I can get out of this one easily. Into Oracle SQL Developer and see if I can run it from there. Okay, so I followed through a slightly different path. Most of the people who use our tool do end up just taking the scripts, verifying them by hand or getting a DBA to have a look at them, and then they would run them within their IDE of choice, whether it's Oracle SQL Developer or Toad or PL SQL Developer. So that's really what I've done at that stage. So now I'm hoping that my Apex application will execute in the test environment because I've moved the changes from dev to test. I'm going to log back into my test workspace. I guess we could look at the Apex utility. I know it's logged in. We can't compare the schemas because we're now in the test environment and it doesn't allow me access to the development schema. Let's see. So the problem has been fixed. Not only we've added that SKU column by running Schema Compare for Oracle, the Apex application runs correctly now because all of the columns are present, but it pulls in my test data. So my test data, not very exciting, says the very first test widget and the second test widget, and the SKU is obviously empty because it's a new column. But it's a very, very condensed example of a scenario which is very common, and I'm pleased to see that I can now go ahead and check that everything works correctly in test, and then consider what the next stage is. So just to summarize, the purpose of the demonstration was to show how a tool like Schema Compare for Oracle can allow you to quickly and easily identify schema changes between environments and then generate the scripts to move the changes between environments to allow you to do Apex development more rapid.
And Tom, if I could pipe in for just a second, we had a client, very similar situation, and I think a lot of the Apex developers can relate to this, is you build stuff quickly, right? And quite often, I don't do this, of course, but you might make changes in production and forget to move those changes back to test or dev. So we had a client I did some work for. I had scripted everything. Everything was checked into version control. One of their developers went ahead and cloned the whole thing and then went off and branched the code without saying anything. So now I've got production, newer than production, and dev. So I've got 3 things that I'm juggling. And Schema Compare is really going to make that easy because I'm going to be able to see the differences between what he cloned and what my development is, write some scripts to get my development stuff back in sync, and then use my install scripts against the production instance to bring them up to sync. So Apex, I think, is not only not immune to this type of thing, but probably more prone to quick development, maybe not by professional developers who don't know all the methodology and all the steps that they should be taking. This tool definitely is going to come in useful and save days, not hours, but days of time trying to retrofit all these different changes.
That's fantastic, Scott. Thanks for sort of sharing that story. It does fit with our experience of talking to customers that Apex is a RAD tool. I mean, that's what the purpose of it is. And although the expectation might not be that you'll be changing the database because you'll just be working within your Apex application, inevitably requests come in for you to change things or to modify the behavior, and people do go in and change the database. You know, they do add columns or do all sorts of crazy stuff, and before you know it, you're looking for that needle in a haystack, and that's hard work without a dedicated tool. This is just a slide just to summarize the purpose behind Schema Compare for Oracle. Cut down on making mistakes. You know, you're going to find it hard to do this by hand because you're not always going to know which objects have changed. So even if you think, gosh, I've only touched 3 tables and 1 new stored procedure, unless you can do a full sweep, you can't be confident that you've actually got everything. The troubleshooting and the fixing errors, the story that Scott told about someone else coming in and changing production wasn't your fault, but it still doesn't work, and you just need to diff environment. Let's make sure dev is the same as test. Let's make sure test is the same as production. Yes, we're in a good state. Now we can move forward. We support all platforms from 9i going forward. We support cloud. You can run it against Amazon RDS. The whole philosophy behind Redgate is to make the tools very easy to use, so we'd like you to download trials and just play around with it in your environment, make sure it works for you. And it's a fully supported trial, so if you've got any questions, you just ping them over and we'll get right back to you. Probably worth just finishing off by saying this is one tool within a suite of 3 tools, and that the second tool is data comparison, which sits very nicely with this tool. If you have issues where you need to compare configuration data, lookup data, move test data between test and dev, has the same look and feel as the Schema Comparison tool, but just works on table data. Okay, thank you, Tom and Scott. I hope everybody enjoyed both of the demonstrations there. I think we've got a little bit over time, so I'm going to quickly just go over a couple of things and then move on to the Q&A. One thing that you've seen up here, and you might have heard me tweeting about it, and some other people tweeting about it, is a competition that Redgate is running at the moment. And yes, we are actually giving somebody the chance to go to space. The competition is called DBA in Space, and full details of this competition can be found at dbainspace.com. The winner will need to have some kind of experience in administrating databases, but you don't have to be a full-time DBA to win it. If you're not and you don't have any experience, it's worth checking out the website. Some fantastic videos on there. And I'm already on question 4, and I'm certainly not a DBA. So if I can do it, you certainly can as well. As I said, we're about to move on to the Q&A section. And I hope you've got some questions in mind. Please enter these now into the question box. We'll eventually try and answer all of those. If after this session you'd like to get in contact with Scott or with Tom and myself, you can see full contact details on the screen now. So
for Sumneva, Scott's email address is scott@sumneva.com. Telephone number US 703-879-4615, and his Twitter handle is spendol. For Redgate, tom.harris@redgate.com, james.murtagh@redgate.com. And we have a couple of telephone numbers there. So our toll-free number is 866-997-0389. And for UK and international customers, it's +44 01 223 438 754. And my Twitter handle is @allthingsoracle. Okay, so we've seen two tools, and I hope you agree that both of these, if you use them in conjunction with your development process and as you're creating applications within Apex, they're certainly going to save you a lot of time going back trying to fix errors, trying to find out why things aren't working and where there are security holes. Obviously, the questions in this part, it would be great if you could kind of focus them within the tools themselves, but also in terms of actual general Apex development. I'm sure a lot of you will enjoy the chance to ask Scott some questions and the fact that he's an Oracle ACE director. Okay, thank you for some really positive feedback on the Sumneva products. I'll be putting this information and these questions, any comments over to Scott, and he'll certainly be in touch to discuss evaluations and pricing. We've got our first question here from Richard. Thank you, Richard. From Richard Soul, thank you. And does Compare have the ability to look at data too?
Hi, Richard. Yeah, thanks for that question. I think I alluded to this when I was talking, is that we have two tools. So Schema Compare, Compare Schema, and then we have another product which is called Data Compare for Oracle, and that allows you to compare table data. The reason we did it all separately is, as a company, we like to keep things simple, and trying to build one product that would do schema and data took us down a road towards complexity which we weren't that comfortable with. I'll see how many more questions we get. Maybe I can give a quick demo of Data Compare if there's time.
Okay, so that does seem to be the only question that we've got. Once again, I'd just like to reiterate this is a great chance to ask Scott some questions about security within Apex development, and to also ask Tom any questions about the Redgate tools. You do have our contact details, so if you'd rather not ask your questions now, then please feel free to get in touch with either of us after this session. But once again, we're going to wrap this session up in a few minutes, so if you do have some questions, please type them in the question panel now. Okay, we have a question from N. Leslie. Thank you for this. It's regarding Schema Compare. So we have rollouts of schemas to over 50 sites. Can the schema comparison process be automated to compare a master site with the 50 other sites after deployment?
That's a fantastic question. And I should explain that the tool I showed you today is obviously a graphical tool, but it does come with a command line version. So essentially you basically save a project which contains the databases that you want to compare, and then at the command line you can just pass in that project and ask it to do things like create a report for you, create you the script that it would need to do the upgrade, actually do the upgrade if you wanted to actually do the upgrade. So you would, in this case, simply run the command line against your 50 sites and get, I guess, 50 reports. And that would be a great way to proceed. I'd be very interested to chat to you and get you a trial and see if we can get you up and running and perhaps give us some feedback.
Okay, so a question from Dave Lloyd to Scott. Thank you, Dave. One of the issues with protecting the value, oh, sorry, we've got a few questions here now, so let me just scroll back up again. They all came in at once. So this is the question from Dave. One of the issues with protecting the value of hidden items is if you change their value via JavaScript, you get a checksum error. How do you get around this, Scott?
It's designed to prevent you from changing the values. If you're going to use JavaScript and you want to temporarily change things, there's a array that Oracle provides. It's the Apex application x01 to x10 array items, and you could use those inside your JavaScript to pass values to those temporarily. Those can't be manipulated as easily from the HTML on the page.
Okay, thanks, Scott. I'm just going to stay with you for a moment. We've got a question from George Barra. Hi, George. Does the evaluation version of sumnevaSERT have all the features enabled?
Yes.
Thank you. This is another question on Schema Compare. For the internal schema, oh, sorry, we've got a few more questions coming in. My dialogue's jumping around. Okay, this is from Raul. Thank you, Raul. For the internal schema, there is a new validation for the admin password. Is there a way for me to also make use of this password validation?
I think that's a question for Scott. I don't know if that's a question for me. Maybe I'm wrong. What do you think, Scott?
Can you repeat that one? Because when you said it was for you, I was reading an email. I apologize.
Okay, so for the internal schema, there is a new validation for the admin password. Is there a way for me to also make use of this password validation?
I'm not quite sure that through the internal Apex workspace.
Hi, Ralph. Could you just clarify your question, please? And
I think let me try to clarify it. Are you referring to the password strength piece that Apex uses for its developers?
So once again, Ralph, if you could just clarify. Oh, here we go. Yes, he is.
Can you use that for your own users? Well, it really depends. If you're using Apex developers, then I believe you can. If you're using LDAP or any third-party external authentication scheme, you've got to kind of build your own strength utility for passwords.
Thanks, Scott. Thank you, Patrick, for your couple of questions. I'm going to direct these to Scott after the session, and he can get back to you regarding those. If you have any commercial questions, please feel free to drop them into the question panel or email them directly to either Scott, Tom, or myself after the presentation. Here's another question from N. Leslie. Thank you. Regarding sumnevaSERT, does it run against pre-4.0 versions and future versions, 4.1 upwards of Apex?
Great question. It does not run against 3.2. We were originally going to do that, and this is a testament to Apex Dynamic Actions. Some of the admin screens where you're building the attributes, we were writing lines and lines and lines of JavaScript, and we looked at 4.0 with the dynamic actions, and it cut out almost all of our JavaScript. So given that most people are on 4, moving towards 4, we made the decision to start it on 4. We're not there on 4.1 yet. I don't think a lot of people have made the jump, but we do have plans to release the next release that will also support Apex 4.1. And I know the next question is going to be, when is that? So I'll just answer that now. We're hoping early 2012 to have the next release out in production.
Fantastic. Thank you, Scott. Okay, so this is a final call for questions before we finish up today. We will be providing contact details for the 2 websites, and from there you'll be able to get in touch with all of the presenters. So, Scott, we have another question from George. Thank you, George. Do you know SQL injections of URL tampering can steal data from DBView using Oracle application context? I basically base my entire security strategy around app context.
No. Can you read that one more time?
Yep. So do you know if SQL injections of URL tampering can steal data from DB-view using Oracle application context? George basically bases his entire security strategy around app context.
Okay, I mean, I'm not directly aware of that, but I mean, is there another follow-up to that?
So I think, George, it might be a good idea if you, this seems to be kind of like a unique scenario for you, so it would probably be a good idea if you get in contact directly with Scott. And he'll
that'd be best.
Question. Okay, so I'd just like to thank everybody for attending today's webinar. I hope it did provide you with some good insight and some good information about the kind of tools that you can use to assist you with your Apex development. All of the information about both the tools shown today, as well as contact details, can be found on the Sumneva website and on the Redgate website. As I mentioned at the beginning of the session, this webinar has been recorded, and I will provide a link to where you can find the recording afterwards, as I have your email addresses from the registration. Okay, thank you once again for everybody attending, and I wish you all a nice evening or a nice day, depending on where you are. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.